perhaps the generations now, the younger generations, aren't hustling because inherently they know that they're going to get taxed. And so maybe the boomers were more of a hustler because they actually kept more of their money.
Why am I going to work so hard when I literally don't have the opportunities that previous generations had? And that's part of the reason why so many young people do go the social media route, is because some of the only young people that are actually making lots of money are like YouTubers.
How can you cut taxes and actually raise revenues? We've seen historically 2 presidents pull this off. The first one was Calvin Coolidge in a significant way. Like I said, 3 times during his terms, he cut taxes significantly and yet was able to raise the federal income revenue significantly. The same thing happened in Reagan's term, where he cut taxes. And then not only did he raise the federal revenue, but over the next 2 decades after that, we saw one of the biggest economic booms in the United States that we've ever seen across the board. But here's the question I'm going to pose to y'all, and here's kind of the twist in this narrative, is this worked back in the day, but would the same thing work today? We've seen a shift when it comes to people's belief about money and about work and about the hustling culture that we've never seen before. Because the boomers, they like to grind, they like to work hard because that was what they grew up with. That was the culture. The millennials like to hustle in some ways less so, but in other ways even more so. But then what we're seeing from the Gen Zers is we're seeing this almost this complete and total turnaround where they're looking at the previous generations and saying, do I want to do the same things that I saw my parents' generation doing or my grandparents' generation doing? And are there more valuable things in life? So the question for y'all is, do y'all think that this would work? Could we still raise the revenue with the generations that we have today?
Well, I think it's a chicken and an egg issue, like which one came first kind of concept, because perhaps the generations now, the younger generations, aren't hustling because inherently they know that they're going to get taxed. And so maybe the boomers were more of a hustler because they actually kept more of their money and they saw the positive reinforcement benefit of that. But now these generations coming up into the workforce are seeing that, and maybe they don't even realize that that's the way that they're behaving. It could just be like an instinct to understand, well, like the more I work, the more I have to pay, and the less money I get. Like, this is crazy. I need to go do something else. Like,
yeah,
so that's a big question. I think it is possible, but I think it's only possible with more government efficiency.
Like 100%, if we're lowering taxes, like you have corporations, big corporations that have a lot of money overseas and they don't repatriate that money to invest in the US because they're going to be paid huge taxes on it. And so if you just, like Trump has talked about, like a tax holiday, bring that money back and invest it. Yeah. And like we've worked with companies that we're trying to put factories in the US. And then it's not just manufacturing though, but you have companies that want to invest. We've already seen this. We've talked about it on some of the other episodes. And so you need to cut regulations, and we need to have a market that is conducive to people wanting to invest in the US. And I watched a video this morning on AI and how these 7 AI things that you need to learn. And they talk about how like AI is not really going to replace everybody, but it's people who know how to use AI will replace people who don't know how to use AI.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's that the grind actually looks different too, because these younger generations, maybe they actually are working really hard, but they're working really hard on their TikTok. You know what I mean? Like that's
everybody wants to be a creator or influencer. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's the promise of money in that. And so maybe the work ethic has shifted to a new platform that we kind of don't fully understand in the older generations. And the problem with that is that we have these generations who have been raised on technology who only understand that as their life world, and so that's where they're heading, and they don't realize that not everybody can be a celebrity, and some of you are gonna have to just do the normal jobs.
I do think that's part of the issue, but there is a little bit of this mentality that is out there that's like, well, part of the reason is just because the younger generations are like lazier than the older generations. And I think it's really important to point out the fact that we talk about the boomers, that they lived through what arguably the most prosperous time and the most economic boom in the United States, like the 80s, enormous, and the 90s, enormous economic boom. The younger generations have lived through economic decline after economic decline. You have like the 2008 housing crisis, and then you have Obama's era and the shaky economy that occurred because of the massive liberal policies that were occurring, and then you have 2020 and COVID. and everything past that. And so there's actually, when you talk about, people moving towards, everybody wants to be a mini celebrity or whatever. I think largely part of the reason for that, part of it, it's cultural, and social media is new, and that's the cool thing now and all that. But part of it is honestly just opportunities. So we talk about, younger, like boomers back in the day could work a normal job and raise a family on a single income and buy a house. That is nearly impossible to do today. Literally nearly impossible. So like you talked about, like, why am I going to work so hard if all my money is going to be taken away with taxes? It's not just taxes. Why am I going to work so hard when I literally don't have the opportunities that previous generations had? If I'm working really, really hard and I'm not immediately rewarded, or I'm not soon rewarded, then there's a damper on that. And that's part of the reason why so many young people do go the social media route, is because some of the only young people that are actually making lots of money are like YouTubers.
What do you think, Troy? You did the most research on this. Do you think that it is possible to cut taxes and have a good economy?
I think it is possible, but I think I landed on 2 points, one of which Ryan mentioned and one of which you mentioned, Doug. And the first point is the businesses are going to have to increase the incentives for Gen Z. And I'm a millennial, technically, I guess. But, when I went and started researching jobs after getting out of school in 2012, I looked all around the country for jobs in my field, which was at the time marketing. And I landed on a company called HubSpot. And I said, this is the company I want to work for more than any other company in the world, even though I hate their liberal platform and their liberal beliefs. But their work environment sounds amazing. And the reason was because their job application was not a PDF that you download. It was a website that essentially sold you on the work environment. They had pictures of the work environment, ping pong tables. Exactly. They had latte machines. They had casual dress code, set your own hours, come in whenever you want. And the reason that attracted me was because that's how I work. I am not a scheduled person. I'm a very unscheduled and passion driven person. That's my personality, but I work very, very hard, but I work very hard on the things I'm passionate about. And one of the things I'm passionate about is fun. Obviously, we did the tax game today, but it's like, if you can make it fun and you can make it a place where I'm going to enjoy being, then I'm going to be able to focus on the things I'm passionate about. And obviously, there's a balance there. I'm not going to be passionate about every little thing I work on, but at the same time, eventually, obviously, I decided not to apply because I didn't really want to work there. I didn't want to move. But at the same time, that, like, I think back to that and I'm like, there's a reason why they got so many applicants, because everybody wanted to work there, right? Like everybody my age at that time wanted to work there. And so there's this need for employers to be educated about the younger generation, I believe, where we're not really going to incentivize them 100% with tax cuts. And the reason is because, and listen, and I'm not saying they're lazy. I don't believe they are, but obviously that's a case by case basis. But I believe that the younger generation, and one of the reasons they're on TikTok and that kind of stuff, is like, that was the other point, was like Doug said, like at some point people need to wake up to this reality of not everybody's going to be an NBA star, and there's other ways to actually make a living. And and I believe that in some cases the younger generation needs to understand, hey, I can go start a business for myself, and I can actually do something I'm passionate about and put those passions to work, in a way that's not just going to generate revenue, but it's actually going to help people, and it's going to like provide more opportunities for my own family, for other people's families, that kind of thing. So I think there's that solution there. But at the same time, back to what I was saying about the incentives, I believe the companies need to be better educated on how do we not make jobs suck so much, and I'm just thinking back to the work environment from like the 90s when I was a kid, watching the adults work, and like walking around, it's like, man, this is the stalest place I've ever been in. The office setting was so bad. The cubicle setting is so bad. And my own experience in a cubicle, it's like, can we just take these things out to the parking lot and burn them, please?
Right.
Like there's got to be a better way to do this. And it's not just the environment and the look and stuff. It's like how you're treating people. It's like the motivations behind the work, all that kind of stuff. I feel like the younger generation has grasped this idea of, they've seen the failures of the work environment and even the hustle itself. There's a positive side to the hustle, and then there's a very negative side. Like I saw many people ruin friendships when I was young. I saw many older people ruin friendships and lifestyle opportunities by trying to sell things like Amway to all their friends, and then all their friends ran away, and it's like they were hustling But guess what? They didn't make any money at it. The ones that I saw, they didn't make any money at it. And at the end of the day, they just lost out on friendships. And maybe they should have been spending their time doing something else besides trying to make an extra buck. You know, so it's like that's where I think the younger generation, Gen Z, they've kind of thrown out that idea. Like, we're not going to do that.
But
you know,
I think it's a human condition.
Do we prioritize national security or due process?
There needs to be some sort of due process of law, or at least some sort of well thought through reason for deporting someone and handing them over to be prosecuted by another government if that government is not very trustworthy.
I think in almost all cases, there's no need for due process. You come in here illegally, you get sent back to your country. What your country does with you, that's up to them. We are not the world police.
I'm so glad that the Trump administration is actually doing something about this when the Biden administration did not. For me personally, Trump bringing one guy back that they accidentally sent, it would not affect me at all.
In most countries, like, it's a big deal. It is a deportable offense. The only issue is that there is a due process. But the problem is in America, this just exposes the ridiculousness of the due process.
When you have a Supreme Court who is making a judgment that's it was like 9-0 to not bring this guy back.
There was no dissenting opinions either.
This is just judges interpreting how due process should work. And due process hasn't been working very well over the